It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, our top story.
Whoa.
Ukraine fires British-made Storm Shadow missiles into Russia's Kursk region for the first time, according to a source. The UK government scraps warships, helicopters and a fleet of drones, saving £500 million. The Defence Secretary says the decision is long overdue.
For too long, our soldiers, sailors, aviators have been stuck with old, outdated equipment because ministers wouldn't make the difficult decommissioning decisions.
Also tonight, rising energy bills push up inflation higher than expected as temperatures plummet. All we can do is try to stop them. We have a special report on the costly and dangerous toll shoplifting is having on small businesses. And One Direction stars attend the funeral of their bandmate Liam Payne in Buckinghamshire. Plus, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages. That's in our press preview from 10:30 right through to midnight. Hello, good evening. It is a move that Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has been making a case for many months. Permission to deploy long-range Western weapons inside Russia. Now, a source says British-made Storm Shadow missiles were used for the first time on Russia by Ukraine, striking the Kursk region. This afternoon, the British Defence Secretary said we are facing increasing global threats. But at the same time, John Healey told Parliament that the UK will scrap 5 warships, dozens of military helicopters and a fleet of drones, saving £500 million. Coming up, we'll get the latest from Kyiv and from Washington as the US President approves the use of anti-personnel landmines by Ukraine. But first, here's our Defence and Security Editor, Deborah Haynes.
Whoa.
Footage on social media purportedly captures a Ukrainian missile strike on Russian soil. Sky News has geolocated the video to the village of Marino in the Kursk region. Separate images shared online by Russian military bloggers purport to show fragments of a British-supplied cruise missile found in the same village. Sky News cannot independently verify the pictures, but they emerged as a source revealed Ukraine has fired Storm Shadow missiles for the first time inside Russia. A high-stakes move in defiance of warnings from Moscow of dire consequences. Perhaps surprising then for all this to happen on the same day as the UK announces cuts to its own defences.
For too long, our soldiers, sailors, aviators have been stuck with old, outdated equipment because ministers wouldn't make the difficult decommissioning decisions. As technology advances at pace, we must move faster towards the future. So today, with full backing from our service chiefs, I can confirm that 6 outdated military capabilities will be taken out of service.
But his opposite number attacked him for failing to say when defence spending will rise.
They have refused to set a pathway to 2.5%, and now we see the consequences. Cuts. Today, they're scrapping key defence capabilities and weakening our national security. Labour have made their choices. They own the consequences.
The equipment set to be axed comprises 5 warships, including 2 amphibious assault vessels used by the Royal Marines, a total of 31 helicopters, with replacements planned to fill the gap, and a fleet of expensive drones.
The announcement came as the government conducts a major review of defence, one that it says will draw on lessons learnt from Russia's war in Ukraine. But one of those lessons is that old kit, no matter how dilapidated, is better than no kit, and that mass has a quality of its own.
Yet holding on to ageing equipment costs money. And while military chiefs won't relish making reductions at a time of growing threats, they have little choice without a lot of extra cash. Yes, there are going to be new investments, but this round of cuts is not the last. Deborah Haynes, Sky News.
Sky's chief correspondent Stuart Ramsey has more from Kyiv.
I don't think you should forget that Ukraine is incredibly grateful to the West, to the United States, for the support that it's getting, the weapons that it's getting, and the money that's come here. And it doesn't matter if it's politicians or actually ordinary people, and certainly the military that I've spoken to have all underlined that. However, they do have concerns. One you hear all the time is that they feel that they're getting enough supplies of missiles and weapons to basically hold the line, to not actually take the fight to Russia, and that they can just literally hold on so that there's a sort of stalemate. They want to be able to actually have victory. Now, of course, the use of these long-range weapons and the fact that permission's been given may go some way to satisfy them on that subject. The other thing that comes up all the time is the use of weapons and the types of weapons and the prevarication that can take place. So we know with the long-range missiles, this has taken a long time of President Zelensky basically pleading with the governments that have them to be able to use them to fire into Russia. They actually point out, look, it took months and months and months just for a few tanks to be delivered to them, which they desperately needed. So that's been a continuous concern. They're also concerned about war fatigue coming through politicians, but also countries themselves. And I think, above all, perhaps the most important one, what is Donald Trump going to do? They're very worried about what his presidency will bring here. Will they be forced into a negotiating position that they don't support and that the country doesn't support? But that's one of the issues they think about. So they're pleased at some of the developments in the last few days, but there's still a lot of concern here.
Stuart Ramsey there. Well, it was the US which first gave the go-ahead to allow its own long-range missiles to be launched into Russia. And now President Biden has approved the provision of anti-personnel landmines to Ukraine. Sky's US correspondent Mark Stone has more.
There is only ever one president at a time. But as they prepare for the inauguration in January, it does feel a little like there are two presidencies in parallel right now. And Ukraine is trying to appeal to both. President Zelensky was near his front lines this week, grateful, he says, at America's latest, maybe last weapons package.
We have a new support package from America. It's worth $275 million. The package includes drones, ammunition for rockets and artillery, and most importantly, mines to stop Russian assaults. This will really strengthen our guys on the front line.
The mine part of this is controversial. This is a country already heavily mined, a legacy of challenges for civilians. We saw them here in 2022. Back then, this location was Ukrainian-held. Now it's in Russian hands. An illustration of a war that Ukraine is not winning. And that's precisely why the Americans say more weapons, more mines are regrettably necessary.
They have a need for things that can help slow down that effort on the part of the Russians. They're fabricating their own anti-personnel landmines right now. The landmines that we would look to provide them would be landmines that are not persistent. You know, we can control when they would self-activate, self-detonate, and that makes it far more safer eventually than the things that they are creating on their own.
For 3 years now, for 1,000 days, America has led the way in Western support for Ukraine, but Biden has been accused of drip-feeding weapons, enough to hold the line but not to win. Now, with permission to use missiles inside Russia and with the delivery of controversial mines, the White House has shifted gear. And so I think there are a number of things going on here. First of all, it is true that the Biden administration was surprised by Putin's use of North Korean soldiers. It gives the whole conflict a more global feel. But beyond that, this is about Donald Trump. President Biden does not know quite what Trump's peace plan for Ukraine would look like, how much it would benefit the Russians. And so right now he is doing all he can to put the Ukrainians in the strongest possible position. These 2 months between presidents are unsettling times, positioning, jockeying by all sides, preparing for a new, very different White House. Mark Stone, Sky News in Washington.
And Mark joins us now. Mark, a series of decisions then over the last couple of days showing allies' commitment to backing Ukraine with that deadline of January and Donald Trump.
Yeah, and I do think that deadline is focusing minds everywhere, because things could fundamentally change here in Washington and therefore could change on the front line in Ukraine, and crucially where that front line is. I think over the course of the next 8 weeks or so, between now and January the 20th, when Donald Trump takes over, both sides will do all that they can to push that front line west if you are Russia, back east again if you are Ukraine. And it is true, as it has been through the course of this conflict, that in the east of Ukraine, the Russians consistently appear to have the upper hand because they've got the troops. Vladimir Putin is willing to plough in ground troops at an extraordinary rate. And they are taking land bit by bit. And so I think over the course of the next 2 months, as I say, we will see that escalate, which is why the Biden administration is doing all it can to, as some have said, Trump-proof the next 2 months, get Ukraine into the best position possible. Behind the scenes, officials here in Washington will say, yes, there will be some sort of resolution, some sort of a peace plan at some point. It will now, of course, come under a Trump presidency. And the concern is that there will be a capitulation of sorts to the Russians. And so I think what they're trying to do is make sure, as I say, that Ukraine is in the strongest possible position to go into those negotiations.
Mark Stone in Washington, thank you. We're back here now, and inflation is rising faster than expected, reaching 2.3% today, higher than the 2.2% forecast and higher again than the Bank of England target of 2%. So what's driving it? It is higher energy prices, which, as the cold weather hits, is impacting some of our most vulnerable people. In a moment, we'll hear from some of those affected. But first, Sky's economics and data editor, Ed Conway, explains what's happening.
This is showing you the rate at which prices are changing each year. You can see the cost of living crisis. They're going up into double-digit territory. More recently, it's gone down to close to 2%. So it's actually a little bit below 2% in September. That's just jumped up. So we've seen that jump up to 2.3% in October, raising the question, actually that's a little bit higher than most economists had expected. What was pushing it up? It was mostly, if you look at the contributions, so all of the different parts contributing to this higher inflation, it was mostly housing, services, including energy, primarily energy that was pushing up inflation. Worth saying as well, we didn't just have this data, we had other data as well on, for instance, house price inflation. It's a different measure of inflation, but still very important for many people. You can see it was pretty high a few years ago, but it recently dropped into negative territory. Now it's just over 3% there, house price inflation. But here's what's critical. Look at the difference between house price inflation and rental inflation. So that's rents. They are rising at an annual rate of over 8%. So if you're renting, you're seeing your costs go up significantly higher than indeed those house prices are going up right now. But put all of that together, and a lot of people are looking at what this means for the Bank of England. So the Bank of England obviously decides on interest rates. Right now, those interest rates are up at 4.75%. Not long ago, because we've always got people out there in the market trying to kind of guess where those rates are going to go soon. Not long ago, investors thought that by next year, so in mid-September, they thought by next year, this could be down to 3.5%. But that shifted quite a lot, OK? And it shifted actually mostly as a result of the budget. So after the budget, those expectations went higher, up to above 4% next summer. The main thing that's shifted now is that's gone up a little bit higher, but people think interest rates aren't going down as quickly. As I say, the budget is the main explanation for that. And when it comes to the budget, one last chart to update. This is showing you how those government borrowing costs, so how much the government is being charged for borrowing versus the US, versus Germany. It's showing how they evolved after the budget compared with other previous budgets. That kind of blue area is other previous budgets. You can see cost of borrowing went up significantly, although critically, nowhere near as much of a roller coaster as we saw after Liz Truss's mini-budget.
Ed Conway there. Well, the hardest hit by rising inflation are those who are struggling most. And as the cold weather hits and energy bills soar, people are finding it harder to stay warm. Sky's business and economics correspondent Gurpreet Narwan reports now from East London.
We're meant to have turned the page on the cost of living crisis. But for many people here at this library in East London, the story feels familiar. They're sheltering from the cold. Energy bills are rising. Inflation is back above the Bank of England's target.
We've obviously got a high degree of disposable income being spent on rent. The next one often is fuel. and there is not much left in terms of just putting food on the table.
There's quite a number of people around to have a chat with, you know, especially with the warm haven where we get a cup of tea or a cup of coffee.
We can't do on the heaters always in the home. So after if school is finished, we come in here and we a little bit spend here and we go home and relax.
30 to 40 people come here after school every day. They can get a hot drink and keep warm. But the government says it has things under control.
Well, we know that the cost of living continues to be a problem for working families across the country, but gone are the days when inflation was at 10, 11%, driving family bills through the roof. The good news is that inflation is stable, it's close to target, and that will be good for working families across the country.
But when it comes to inflation, is Labour risking the recovery?
Labour's first budget increased investment spending, a big cash injection into the economy. It's also raising employers' national insurance contributions. Businesses say they will raise prices as a result.
At the moment, there are months when some of our suppliers are going unpaid, you know, for as long as they will allow. And it's literally pinching from here to pay someone else when we can. And it wasn't this bad before. It's becoming really dire. It's only by the grace of God that we're keeping afloat right now.
The Tories say the government is playing with fire.
I think what is most important now is, as we look forward over the coming years, what is the trajectory of inflation like to be like? And the independent forecaster, the Office for Budget Responsibility, tells us that it will be higher in every year as a consequence of the measures taken by this government.
The government is sanguine about inflation. But if the last few years have taught us anything, it's that the public can't afford for policymakers to be complacent. Gurpreet Narwan, Sky News.
Sky News has witnessed the costly and dangerous toll that shoplifting is having on small businesses. Offences recorded by police in England and Wales have risen to the highest level in 20 years, with one shopkeeper telling us all we can do is try to stop them. Our People and Politics correspondent Nick Martin has this special report.
So it's quite a busy location, isn't it? I'm going to spend a few days in a city centre convenience store, which is being plagued by shoplifting. Over the past few months, shop workers here have grappled with thieves. They've been threatened with knives. And this is where the brazen come to steal, knowing there will be no consequences.
I mean, we've got 5 stores around the country, and it's a big problem in all of them.
The whole store is covered by cameras, and shop worker Anton keeps a close eye on the stock. We watch as a schoolboy comes into the store. He picks up 3 bags of crisps and stuffs them into his bag. Anton is watching. He waits at the front door to see if the boy tries to leave without paying.
Bag. Come on. Put here. Everything. Okay, yeah. All of them.
The bag is opened and out come the crisps.
Okay. Can go out, yeah? Don't come here everywhere in time, yeah? You're free.
He's told not to come back, but the police aren't called and the boy is allowed to leave. For more than a decade, anyone shoplifting goods with a value of under £200 have received a less serious punishment. Since then, shoplifting's gone up by 1/3, while those being charged has fallen. A few minutes later, another youngster puts something into his bag. Anton is poised again.
Yeah, don't come here anymore. You're on the CCTV. Get out.
The boy responds by laughing. But this is no joke for independent retailers like Ricky Dougal, who owns this store.
What's generally the response from the police when you call them about an incident?
The police do not want to know, really. When they do come out, they don't want to do anything about it.
Retailers are fed up, as an exclusive Sky News and Association of Convenience Stores survey shows. 80% of shopkeepers surveyed had an incident of retail crime in the past week. 94% of shopkeepers say in their experience shoplifting has got worse over the last year. 83% of them are not confident that the police will take action against the perpetrators of retail crime on their premises. The government says it wants to introduce stronger measures to tackle shoplifting, as well as introducing a separate offence for assaulting shop workers. Retailers say this kind of thing cannot continue, that shoplifting must have consequences if the problem is to be properly tackled. Nick Martin, Sky News.
The United States has vetoed a UN resolution calling for an immediate and unconditional ceasefire in Gaza. The vote came after the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu made a brief visit to central Gaza. 14 Security Council members voted in favour, but the US blocked it because the release of hostages was not a precondition for a truce. We got reaction from the United Nations and from the Israeli government spokesperson after that vote.
It sounds an insult to the families of the hostages. It sounds an insult to the right to life, both of the hostages and of the Palestinians who are trapped under constant bombing, to the Palestinians who have been killed. We are at 43,800 right now. 70% of the victims are women and children. And again, the fact that Israel, with the support of the United States, continue to put new conditions, new clauses, it's preposterous and untenable.
The people responsible for the war in Gaza are Hamas. We're taking them apart. There's about 24 battalions. We've shattered about 23 of them. The remnants have regrouped in the north. We're taking them apart as well. But ultimately, Gazans are not going anywhere, and nor are Israel. So ultimately, Gazans will be able to live there in peace, but only with a leadership that wants to build their own future rather than to destroy my country.
A police investigation has been launched after the remains of a baby were found in a field in Greater Manchester. A dog walker discovered the body near Ashton's Field in Salford. Police say it's too early to tell the baby's ethnicity, gender or where they're from. They're urging anybody with information to get in touch. The human rights lawyer appointed by Harrods as an independent advocate for survivors has told Sky News it's likely there could be more alleged victims of Mohammed Al-Fayed yet to come forward. Nearly 300 women have accused the late Harrods owner of crimes, including rape and sexual assault. Dame Jasvinda Sangera was speaking to Sarah Jane Mee on the UK Tonight.
Currently, in the Harrods process, there are 290 women. However, what I will say is view that with caution, because there will be, in my experience, many women out there who have yet to report. You know, there'll be many women who are sitting on their reporting for a number of reasons. We know it takes a lot of courage to disclose.
Alec Baldwin's film Rust has had a low-profile world premiere at a film festival in Poland with a dedication to cinematographer Helena Hutchins, who was fatally shot in an accident on the set 3 years ago. Baldwin, who was pointing the gun at Ms Hutchins when it went off, was found not guilty of involuntary manslaughter in July. He didn't attend tonight's premiere, though director Joel Souza did. Now, when flood waters engulfed areas of Spain more than 2 weeks ago, whole communities were washed away. Volunteers are still running massive clean-up operations where more than 200 people died and feeling abandoned by the government. Sky's Europe correspondent Adam Parsons has this report.
In Paiporta, you can wash away the mud, but the horrific memories are embedded into the very fabric of this town. Dozens died when floodwater ripped through here. Among them, Juan's father, Enrique. Enrique drowned in an underground car park. By the time Juan arrived, the water had engulfed everything, including his own hope.
And when I arrived walking, I could to see the disaster. I could to see the water inside the parking, and there was very noise, and I said, Enrique, Papa, Enrique, and calm. I think no. I be sure that it was impossible to do anything.
In Catarroja, another of the town's most grievously hit, they are still clearing out these underground car parks. We're invited inside. The people working down here say it is grueling and mentally exhausting. The floor slick with mud and floodwater. One of these underground car parks, you can suddenly imagine just how hellish they would have been on the day of the flood. Because even after 3 weeks of a clear-up operation, it's still full of mud. There's still abandoned cars here. But on the day when disaster struck these towns, the water would have cascaded in and kept filling this place until it reached the ceiling. The people working here are volunteers. These towns are still having to help themselves. A fortnight ago, we met Christina in Paiporta, surrounded by chaos and feeling forgotten by her own government. Since then, the military have arrived to help clear up a belated show of support.
We are still angry because we now see how they can help us. We see the army, now we are organized and everything is improving, but we lost a lot of days in the beginning.
The suffering of this region is a story of fragility, of modern towns destroyed by the whims of weather, of leaders who didn't lead and victims who died a miserable, muddy death. Adam Parsons, Sky News, Paiporta.
One Direction stars joined friends and family of Liam Payne at a private funeral in Buckinghamshire today. The 31-year-old singer died last month after falling from the balcony of his hotel room in the Argentine capital, Buenos Aires. Sky's arts and entertainment correspondent Katie Spencer reports.
An unthinkable day for those who knew and loved Liam Payne. Heartbreaking for his family, including his young son. The press abiding by the family's request to keep a respectful distance. His One Direction bandmates coming together in public for the saddest of circumstances, the death of one of their own. The congregation made up of some of the biggest names in music, many here all too familiar with the trials of navigating fame, something Payne had seemingly struggled to make peace with. Alongside Payne's family, his American girlfriend Kate Cassidy, who'd been with the star just days before his death. Fans by and large staying away, just a handful of people watching on.
Really sad day, it's just horrible. I feel so sorry for the family, it's just really not pleasant for them, is it?
A lot of us in our sort of like 20s, we grew up with One Direction, and I think, yeah, it's been a sad day for sure.
Having no regrets is all that she really wants.
After rising to fame on The X Factor, Payne was part of one of the most successful boy bands of all time. One Direction selling 70 million records during their 5-year career. While the singer found some success as a solo artist, he'd struggled to match those heights. But the adoration from those who grew up listening to his band songs never diminished and was seen in the response to his death from a third-floor balcony of a Buenos Aires hotel. Prosecutors in recent weeks confirming 3 arrests have been made, including one individual charged with being complicit in the supply of drugs. The pain of it all wrought into his father's face, who'd travelled to Argentina to bring his son's body home. While fans of his from around the world have held their own vigils over the past few weeks, this service was for those closest to the singer. Many having since reflected on the great joy Liam Payne took in making other people happy, an inescapable sadness from family, friends and fans at all they've lost. Katie Spencer, Sky News.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview. Tonight, joined by the Daily Mirror's Associate Editor, Kevin Maguire, and the Daily Mail's Whitehall Editor, Claire Ellicott. Welcome to both of you. And among the stories we will be discussing, this on the front page of The Eye. Its headline, the UK defies Putin as Ukraine fires British missiles into Russia. That and plenty more, of course, when we come back.
day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
You want to jump in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
This is Sky News. In just a moment, the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. First, though, a reminder of our top stories this evening. Ukraine has fired British-made Storm Shadow missiles into Russia's Kursk region for the first time, according to a source. The Defence Secretary has said the UK will scrap 5 outdated warships, dozens of military helicopters and a fleet of drones to save £500 million. And inflation has risen sharply to 2.3%, its highest level in 6 months, driven largely by rising energy prices. Hello there, you're watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the Daily Mirror's associate editor, Kevin Maguire, and the Daily Mail's Whitehall editor, Claire Ellicott. Welcome and great to see both of you. So as ever, let's take a look at the front pages, starting with the Financial Times. Ukraine fires British-made missiles into Russia is their lead story. Front of the Eye, UK defies Putin as Ukraine fires British missiles into Russia. Daily Mail also reports on the British Storm Shadow missiles, saying the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, personally approved the missile strike. It's also the lead story for The Guardian. Their headline, Ukraine attacks targets in Russia with UK missiles for the first time. The Times also reporting on the British missiles being used in Russia with images of the explosions in the Kursk region. The same story makes the front of The Telegraph with more details on defence cuts in the UK after the government announced it was scrapping warships, military helicopters and drones to save money. Meanwhile, The Star takes a more practical approach, teaching its readers how to build their own nuclear shelter. And tributes to former One Direction star Liam Payne make the front page of the Metro, with friends and loved ones of the singer attending his funeral today. While The Sun reports on the reunion of One Direction stars for the funeral with the headline, All for One. And the Mirror too, farewell Liam, says the Mirror. But don't forget, you can scan the QR code that you'll see on screen during the programme and check out those front pages for yourself while you watch our guests. Coming on to, obviously, Liam Payne a little bit later in the programme, but Claire, Kevin, let's kick off with the defence news today, of which there was aplenty. Claire, first of all, Storm Shadows in action.
Yes, so for the first time, the Ukraine has been able to fire these Storm Shadow missiles, which are Anglo-French, into Russian territory. So this is the first time since the conflict began that this has happened, and it's a huge development in the Ukrainian war. It will give Kyiv a good, it'll come at a good time for Kyiv because they're falling behind on the battlefield. Russia have just announced that they've got these 10,000 North Korean troops, which are obviously it's a huge blow to morale. So the fact that they can now use these missiles just after Joe Biden, the US president, has said that they can use ATACMS, an American missile in Russian territory. This is a big moment for the war, but whether it changes the dial, we think it's unlikely, but it is a big moment for the war and a big moment for Zelensky.
Yes, I mean, Storm Shadow's been used before, Black Sea Fleet on Crimea, which is internationally deemed, obviously, as Ukrainian territory. But this is a sort of a concerted effort now, isn't it? First of all, the US and its ATACMS, Storm Shadow, anti-personnel mines as well, the US announcing today. There's a sort of sense of impetus now, which the Ukrainians would argue is simply too late.
Yeah, and it probably comes because of Donald Trump's election. And 2 months' time, he could possibly cut off or channel much narrower the flow of US arms, the US being critical, absolutely critical in supplying Ukraine. The first question I wanted answered when it was announced, or it broke that Storm Shadows had been fired into Russian territory, was how many? And when it's up to 12, the Mail's answered it in the headline. But it's an escalation for the UK. because we're sucked further in, been supplying weapons, but T&Cs have been applied, they've been able to say you can't use them into Russian territory. Well, now they can, and it's very interesting. It's only because Biden's changed his position in the White House, presumably because of Trump, because they rely on US navigation data, so they can't just go on their own. But as the Mail has, Starmer personally approved it. You'd like to think that would be the case, and the Prime Minister, but there is a risk in this, unquestionably, with Putin being very unpredictable, very reckless, very dangerous. And how does he now respond?
Indeed, the UK defies Putin, Ukraine firing these British missiles into Russia. How does he respond? But the idea of using any form of nuclear weapon with Donald Trump coming in, who many deem to be unpredictable, many have ruled out, in fact. So this might be your window. Let's move on also to the defence cuts, shall we, as well, which feels. It's a strange timing in the sense that Russia has used its oldest weapons in Ukraine, and here we are, the Defence Secretary, ruling out scrapping, not mothballing, a whole series, of warships, drones, helicopters, which elsewhere might prove useful.
Yes, it's quite a debate. John Healey made these announcements today. The news has been overshadowed by the Storm Shadow news, but it is quite a big announcement. £500 million he's trying to save by scrapping some of this older equipment. There's a big debate about whether you need to modernise this equipment, but we have been debating non-stop whether Labour are going to get to spending 2.5% of GDP on defence, something they've said they'll do, but they've not set out a timetable for and have refused to be drawn on. So Ben Wallace has said that defence has been hollowed out under successive governments and the former Defence Secretary. I think that John Healey has, and made these announcements today, a lot of people who are concerned about defence spending will think this is a very bad thing. But actually there was a former Armed Forces Minister, James Heapy, who said it wasn't the end of the world, that actually we needed to modernise our equipment. But it doesn't sound like the right kind of mood music given all of the kind of, we've got the Middle East raging, Ukraine, they're having to use these weapons today. It doesn't seem like the right kind of optics for...
There felt a slight jarring that there we are. Ukraine is now using UK-supplied Storm Shadow missiles into Russia, and at the same time ships, drones and other equipment is being decommissioned here. But it does appear to be, as James Heapy is pointing out, mainly approaching its sell-by date. Wouldn't have been much use anyway. I think in the past, the UK, when it decommissions helicopters, warships and so on, often sells them to other countries, sometimes quite ruthless dictatorships and oppressive regimes. I don't know if any of this will be going Ukraine's way or whether it will be any use for them, but it did feel just one of those moments that felt slightly odd. But why waste money on rubbish equipment when you could spend that on something better going forward? And this whole defence spending issue, the whole point of being in NATO with 30 other countries is you don't have to fight anybody on your own. And Britain is one of the big defence spenders in the world, certainly in terms of the amount we spend. I mean, the US is probably bigger than the next 6, 7 countries combined, but we do spend more than the 2% NATO membership, and I think we're about 6th in cash terms around the world.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, that many of the elements that were scrapped today, HMS Northumberland, badly damaged, cost an absolute fortune to get it back on. The Watchkeeper drones only started operating in about 2018. They were 8 years late. They've struggled to operate in poor weather conditions, limiting their utility. Rapid development of warfare means they're likely to be shot down. So, there's a redundancy, a speedy redundancy of weapon that takes a long time to develop.
Well, particularly if you're 8 years late.
Well, but this is the difficulty, isn't it? The procurement process is so slow in defence that how you future-proof yourself, as many businesses find, including broadcasting, but it's a very expensive thing to deliver and to make usable long term.
Yes, and I mean, it's a problem governments have a lot, how to plan for the future when you're in for 5-year terms and you can only really think that far ahead. John Healey's obviously committed this defence review, and we'll get the results of that fairly soon. Lots and lots of people have been feeding into this who know their staff. So you would hope that Labour would come up with a good plan for defence, because it does feel a time in which you need to be thinking about the future. You have Donald Trump is going to be the US president. He is going to take, as we said before, an unpredictable approach to some of these conflicts. When we talk about NATO spending, we talk about what's happening in Europe, we talk about what's happening in Ukraine, we've got to make sure Britain is able to help its allies and also fight wars on perhaps lots of fronts in the future. It's actually a really big question what does happen with defence.
And one final thought, which is the US approving US anti-personnel mines today.
Yeah.
Hugely controversial for many people. It seems to be defensively where Ukraine needs to retreat, either in the Donbas region or in Kursk, which is part of its own incursion into Russian territory. The US trying to reassure people that these ones have a natural shelf life, so there's no legacy issue, which has devastated, large parts of the globe in previous wars.
No, absolutely. There are international treaties now banning landmines because the number of civilians who are killed after the armies
and some of them look like toys that children pick up, so the number of children maimed by it is extremely high.
But getting them over just shows you, I think, Ukraine's losing the war. Russia is gradually grinding forward, and there's terrible. We read about the terrible casualties on the Russian side, but we don't read about the terrible casualties on the Ukrainian side. And Ukraine has a smaller population, so can't afford to pour as many people into the meat grinder that this front has become. I would really like to see and read more about up-to-date Ukrainian casualties, but it's almost as if, most UK papers, understandably, like most people in the UK and political parties, have taken the side of Ukraine. But I would like to know how many people they have lost, killed and injured. We read about the Russians, but how many Ukrainians?
Yeah.
There must be considerable numbers. And the mines, which you feel very uncomfortable about, they're going to be used defensively.
The cost of this war, in human casualty terms, in terms of cost of the military equipment and in terms of the inflationary effects of what we've seen around the world, I'd like to see a figure for all of that as well.
The area they're fighting over now is just about a wasteland. Yeah. It's been completely blasted away.
Except for its rare earth minerals, of course. And,
No, you're right, down the long run.
Let's go on to assisted dying, shall we, which is in The Guardian. The mood. What is the mood music now, I suppose, is what I'm asking, in the sense that it's being rushed by some, senior veteran MPs.
Yes, so we have the mother of the House, Diane Abbott, who's the longest-serving female MP, and the father of the House, Sir Edward Lee, a Tory and a Labour MP, very Tory and a very Labour MP, have come together to reject this assisted dying bill, which is a private member's bill, so it's brought by a backbench MP, not by the government. And MPs are going to be able to vote on it according to their conscience. There'll be no party line. Tories won't vote one way, Labour won't vote one way. It's a hugely emotive issue. Everybody has very strong views on it. A lot of people haven't made up their minds, and there's not really a very good way of canvassing MPs to see which way they're going. A lot of the government, a lot of the cabinet have spoken out about their views on it, and actually I think there was a view that Labour would be pro-assisted dying and making it easier for people in pain to end their lives. And actually quite a few prominent people like Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, have come out and said that they don't think that this bill is fit for purpose. There's lots of Tories who have concerns that there's not going to be enough time to debate this bill. And
how long do people have to debate it? I mean, it's very short, isn't it?
So it's got the same number of parliamentary stages a normal bill would have, but there's just not going to be as much time in the House to talk about it, and there's not going to be as much time to decide to debate elements of the bill, because normally they would go through committee stage and you would come up with a good plan as to answer people's concerns, because there's, it's just come up with these ideas. There's going to be a judge overseeing this. There's going to... It's just not been worked out.
The term with the vote on the 29th of November, which is only the initial vote, the term that Kim Leadbeater, the MP, and her team now use is it's doable if all their promises turn up, which just means it's going to be very, very close.
Okay.
It'll be very, very close. And if it's close, I don't think there'll be enough momentum to get through a change like this. I could see a vote for it, but a narrow vote for it, and then the government will want an inquiry, a commission, a study, spend...
A narrow vote will lead to hesitancy, is what you're saying.
Yeah, but, you know, all the big social changes happened under Labour in the 60s. Decriminalising homosexuality, abolition, Sidney Silverman of the death penalty and others. They were all individual MPs. Kim Leadbeater this time pushes it forward, but you need the government to actually be behind it too.
We'll watch that closely end of next week,
Abortion didn't steal, sorry.
That's the other one.
Liberal. Yeah.
Good memory of all of these. But anyway, lots more still to come. We will be looking at this story in The Sun as the friends and loved ones of the former One Direction star Liam Payne mourned the singer at his funeral.
Prime Minister Modi is the most popular politician in the country. He is expected to win his third term in these elections.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party, a promise fulfilled. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
He paid over 50,000 to traffickers to get him to America. Instead, he was kidnapped, tied up, and threatened by smugglers. A commando from the state force walks me through to a Maitai village on the front line.
Firing the civilian and they're burning our house.
We cross to the opposite side, held by the cookies.
When they fire, we have to retaliate.
Sky News, get the full story first. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration.
The enthusiasm is palpable. The young desire change.
These elections are a pivotal moment for the country's economic and political history. The concern here is that the public healthcare system is inadequate.
In a prayer, she's asking God to help understand what happened. I cannot carry on. God, help me. He says his world has crashed. Like him, there are scores of families searching for their loved ones.
Too often have families endured such tragedies for the negligence not only by the administration, but also by spiritual people in this country. Free, wherever you get your news. Even though it has few seats in Parliament, Kashmir is symbolic and very significant. It's often been called a nuclear flashpoint.
This may be the Premier League. I'm not like everybody else. Well, this duo have been in a league of their own. It's Haaland, a striker like no other. Not like everybody else. Son, starman for Tottenham Hotspur. Like everybody else. That's just stunning. Wow! Everybody else. Like everybody else. Like everybody else.
Manchester City, Tottenham on NBC and Peacock.
We arrive, a secret hospital hidden in the Myanmar jungle, treating the victims of this bloody war. This is Myanmar today. Its military rulers don't want the world to see, but we have.
I fight for my own future. I fight for my generation's future.
This is an actual crime.
They don't care for that.
Myanmar army is only a couple of kilometers away.
So this is a major humanitarian disaster.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Well, welcome back. You are watching the Press Preview. Joining me again, the Daily Mirror's Associate Editor, Kevin Maguire, and the Daily Mail's Whitehall Editor, Claire Ellicott. Welcome back to both of you. Quick word about inflation going in the wrong direction, impacting on interest rate decisions later.
Yeah, and
it's right at the top there, isn't it? Yeah,
top right. It would have been a much bigger story in the papers tomorrow if Storm Shadow missiles hadn't been fired at Ukraine. It's the nature of news. You know, what happens, what crowds others out. But no, the biggest rise for 2 years, up 0.6 to 2.3. It's bad in your spending power, but it also means the Bank of England is less likely to cut interest rates because, of course, its real aim is to squeeze inflation below 2%. So it's bad all round.
The problem is it's energy prices as well, which goes back to the winter fuel payments for people. We know the energy price cap's changing as well, and it all piles pressure back onto that decision that we had earlier in this Labour government.
Yes, it feels like we're having a rerun of some of the worst times of last year, and energy prices going up, house prices as well is doing some damage here, and we're looking at a winter in which some people have lost their winter fuel payments, and it's a worrying time for many, I think.
But it's not 11.1%.
No, this is very true. This is very true. Let's go on to the Sun, shall we? And in fact, many of the old red tops, as we describe them, leading on this, not surprisingly, all for one, the remaining members of One Direction back together. You know, for the first time since they last performed, well, not even including Zayn Malik there, for the tragic news that we were all on for that night. When the news broke about Liam Payne's death in Buenos Aires, a hotel balcony in the Argentine capital, you know, it's just a reminder that 31 is no age at all, far too young.
Yes, and they call him their brother, which I think is so touching. And you see Cheryl Tweedy, who it was his partner. They've got a child together. She's obviously going to have had the worst day, and we were on for that moment. And he was only 31, and he died after he fell off a balcony in Buenos Aires. He'd been with his girlfriend. You know, there was a lot of reporting about how he'd struggled with the price of fame and how it had taken a real toll on his life. But today was a day for his family and his friends and his bandmates to mourn him.
I like that front page, actually. I think it's pretty stylish, that. It's no pictures of his parents, of course. And it's the same. It's the same with the Mirror,
paper,
which we've chosen to have his coffin, to remind it basically him. But it's you kind of I think both are good front pages, and you look at it. It's because he was 31, and it was kind of, I remember the night it happened and we were on it was breaking, and you're thinking, is this really true? And the reports coming out of Argentina, have they got it wrong? Quite what has happened? And we still don't know exactly what happened, why he came to fall from that balcony. We know more facts now, but we don't quite know the definitive reason. But times like this, yes, you think of his bandmates, but you think of his child and the mother of his child, and you think of his parents and family, which is just awful to have somebody that had been so proud of him, and he was living a life they could never have dreamed of. And then it all ends tragically, with his death at such an early age.
And it's so touching the way the Mirror has got the floral tribute left by his 7-year-old son, Bear. His son was Cheryl Tweedy. It's just a really touching front page.
Yeah, it's just genuinely sad, isn't it?
Yeah.
Genuinely.
Yes. Yeah.
OK, we will take a look at the weather now. Thank you both very much indeed. Here is the weather then. The weather will turn milder at the weekend as a storm system moves in, but the transition is likely to bring some significant disruption in the form of heavy rain, hill snow and strong winds. Before that, there is another system in the southwest, which will bring some rain, sleet and hill snow to southern Ireland and southern counties even of England. This is likely to cause some challenging driving conditions for the morning rush hour. The wintry mix will spread eastward through the morning, reaching the southeast before clearing away to the near continent. For much of the country, it'll be a cold, frosty start to the day. Well, our press preview continues through the 11. We'll have more analysis and reaction after Sky News is told that Ukraine has fired British-made Storm Shadow cruise missiles into Russia.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before?
Yes. Cheers. We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.